Here we go. That was so we could sync it. All right, so if you haven't heard, it's really hard to imagine, but because I tell everybody, I got myself a laser cutter, and I'm really excited about it. So I wanted to come and tell everybody, show you what it's all about. Here's a video that I took. Yeah, it's running. So you can see how it works. So this is I think it's a 1/4-inch piece of balsa wood, and the machine's now just going around and like it traces the outline of the area that's going to be cut. Yeah, exactly. So and then I got to put on those safety glasses because it is a laser beam, and I've got a metal piece of metal that I put on the workbench so that the laser beam doesn't carve into the workbench. So there's potential. What's that?
That's a good idea.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's really important. Now, I just turn on air. That's like an option for a laser beam. It puts air, you can almost see it if I hold this camera. Anyway, there's a tube that puts compressed air down and kind of blows the smoke away. That's optional. You don't need to have something like that, but it does help with making the cuts a little bit cleaner. And yeah, you can see this is, like I said, 1/4-inch balsa. You can see how fast it's moving right along there.
Is this a 5-watt or 10-watt?
This is a 10-watt laser.
10 watt, okay.
Yeah, so you can get lasers that are kind of affordable up to as much as 20 watts. Beyond that, you're starting to look at a CO2 laser. Those are industrial strength and they cost thousands. I got more details on a slideshow later on. But anyway, that's more or less the important thing. We can watch more videos later, but you can see, it'll cut through this 1/4-inch in one pass.
How much smoke does that generate?
So it does, if I'm cutting...
set off the fire alarm type of thing.
No, I won't set off the fire alarm. But if I'm cutting like this all afternoon and, there's a lot of stopping to switch out pieces of wood, when I back up, I can see a little bit of a haze. And of course, it smells like burning wood. But it's not, it doesn't force me outdoors. It doesn't set off the smoke detector. And if it's nice out and I can open the windows, it's perfect. I don't notice anything at all.
All right, how do you program in what you're cutting?
All right, so let's go into the presentation now.
I see a plant.
Let me just get this full screen here.
The other thing I had a question for is I saw some videos about this, and they were talking about not having a reflective surface. I didn't know how that metal acted with the laser, if it was reflective at all.
Yeah, so the metal's just there after you go through. So I haven't had any problems with it bouncing off and scorching the bottom side of the wood. I'll just make sure I know how to, okay. All right, so what's in it for me? Why do I care? Why am I here to listen to this? So maybe you don't build planes right now, but maybe someday you want to, and you might want to know about, how a laser could help. And of course, even if you're not going to build a plane, you might want to make spare parts. So knowing how,
I object to number 2.
So that could come in handy someday, especially if you know somebody with a laser who's willing to cut out parts for you, and that's me. Decorations. You don't just cut out plywood. You can cut out, monocoat really well with this. And I've got a lot more slides on that. And it works really, really good for that. And of course, it's a technology type of thing. So we're all into this hobby for the tech, and this is just yet more. So let's talk about, the basic parts of the laser cutter engraver machine. Of course, the heart of it is the laser head right here, and that's going to be attached with a focus adjustment. Now, I know a laser is supposed to be, a focus beam of light, but there is a focal distance that it cuts best, and if you don't have the focus adjust right, you can tell. So focus adjustment is important, and that's one of the features to look at, for different kinds of engravers on the market, is how easy is it to use the focus adjustment. There's also, of course, a belt drive with stepper motors, for positioning. That's how it moves the laser beam into position. The frame is going to be mine's made out of aluminum. It doesn't have to be especially strong, but it does need to be, pretty stiff. it is slinging this around with some momentum and stuff, so you don't want vibrations and stuff, because that'll show up in the whatever it is you're cutting or engraving. There's a controller, so that's like there's a circuit board in there. This one has a screen on it. They don't all have a screen. The controller is actually what's doing the real-time moving around of the thing. What's not shown here is you've got a computer like this with the software. So you hook it up by a USB cable. So the actual artwork you put into the computer, you figure out, all the parameters and stuff, and that goes into the controller, and the controller is actually running the machine while it's cutting. But you do need that computer nearby.
Does the software come with the laser when you buy it?
So that's important to pay attention to, because some come with software, some don't. So I'll talk about that later too. And like I said, USB cable to connect. Some of them have Wi-Fi now, so you'll go and you'll be able to connect to it over Wi-Fi. Mine does have that. I don't use it because I'm always right next to it, and it's just much easier to plug in. So I don't think that's really helpful, the Wi-Fi capability, but they do exist. So how much do these things cost? I mean, you could spend $1,000 more on these. You can spend as much as you want on a machine, right? But most of them are in the range of a good bandsaw. Like this Rockler bandsaw here was $650. I paid about that for my laser machine with the extension kit. And I point out the bandsaw because that's the next comparable type of machine that you would use for the same type of thing. Plus, you can do engraving with a laser machine. So
They also have sales too. They'll have like
exactly,
or they'll have like discounted models or repaired ones or something like that. That you get a little cheaper.
You could do that too, and most of us are pretty handy, so I wouldn't be afraid of that kind of thing. So what can you do with a laser engraver? Of course, you can cut out balsa and plywood parts. You can engrave parts, and it really comes out good. You can, like I said, cut out monocoat. We'll talk more about that. And of course, you can cut masking materials for painting. So if you like to, paint decorations, you can cut out the masking material, lay it out, paint over it, peel it off. You got a nice decoration. And of course, you can do anything else. If you go on YouTube and stuff and see what people are doing with this. I've made a lot of boxes. You can cut out cardboard with this stuff. My wife likes to cut out little things to make into like greeting cards. So it's really handy.
How thick a piece of wood can you cut through?
Now, let's go into that. So for like plywood, you could go up about as much. So like I said, mine's 10 watts. And I can cut up to like 1/4 inch thick plywood or 3/8 thick balsa wood. I can't do 1/2 inch balsa, and I can't do like 1/4 inch plywood. You can buy like craft plywood, and you can buy aircraft grade plywood. The aircraft grade plywood is a lot harder to cut through. So it's usually like 5-ply and stuff. And I can't get through that. But the craft plywood is wicked easy to cut through.
Would the 20 watt be able to?
Probably.
So
Probably.
You can't just make multiple passes
You
on it, Mike?
you do have to make multiple passes, especially on plywood. In fact, let me skip ahead to that. So for cutting balsa, you have to do it in one pass, because if you try to do multiple passes, it catches on fire.
That's a problem.
Yeah, because where it gets charred, it absorbs a lot more heat.
Yeah.
Then you get the
Then the
smoke.
alarms go off.
Yeah, so that's something I didn't put in this presentation, and anybody watching, the recording will get the benefit. My machine came with a smoke detector built into it, so if it thinks it's on fire, it'll shut itself down. That's saved me a few times. So that's a feature that, if you're thinking about buying one of these one day, definitely pay attention to that kind of thing. That can be handy. Soft balsa is much easier to cut than harder balsa, and you'll become a lot more aware of how much variation in balsa hardness there is if you use a laser cutter on it. And you can even see a lot of variation in the hardness, within a single piece of balsa wood. So, you might cut through most of it, but have one strip, of harder balsa where it doesn't quite cut through. You just have to finish it off with a knife.
How do you hold the material down while it's cutting?
So most of the time I don't. Well, I might tape it down, or I might put like metal blocks on corners where it's not going to go. But like for plywood, you don't necessarily have to. It'll just stay, because the machine never actually touches the material. Now, with the blowing of the air, sometimes that does, like if there's like little lightning circles, sometimes the air will pop the little circles out. So it does pay to like add little tabs so that they don't come out, and then just cut them with a knife later on. So like I said, with my 10-watt laser, I can cut through 3/8 inch balsa. I cannot do 1/2. I tried, it doesn't work. Plywood. Oops.
If you're cutting through that thicker wood, does it tend to burn the wood a bit more? Because you're making multiple passes?
Yeah, so that's something here, is that, and it happens even more with plywood. On plywood, you need multiple passes, and it tends to cut wider at the top surface and narrowest at the bottom surface. So you end up with this little bit of a taper. And like John Lavery, I gave him some bulkheads, and he went to set them up on his, and they're all leaning off, a little bit. And he's like, "What's going on?" I'm like, "That's the way the machine is." So just be aware that's going to happen. Like I said, I can cut through 1/4 inch light plywood, but not the 5-ply aircraft plywood. Light ply, if you've built any of the SIG, SIG kits that we've been building, all the sides and stuff are made out of light ply. So that's what that stuff is, and this machine goes right through it.
So if you had a recommendation of getting a 10 or a 20 watt, would you go with a 20?
There's a big price difference between 10 and 20 watt.
That's why I'm asking
It's
that
huge.
question.
It's substantial.
Some of the machines, though, the head can be changed, so you can do an upgrade later on.
Right.
True, but if you're gonna
But you'll add $200 to $500 extra.
Yeah, on a $600 machine, it's
Yeah.
a
It's
big
substantial,
difference.
but if it's worth it, that's the question really. What are you really getting with that?
Yeah, and that's just it. I mean, how thick do you need to cut on a regular basis? For me, like,
Thinking also that when I crash, it doesn't break it.
well, if you build it light, you won't crash so much.
That's a cause and effect thing. You're supposed to spend a little more time on the simulator.
You're supposed to build to fly, not to crash.
Okay, John Mary.
All right, let's go back to, let's see. Actually, we'll go back a slide.
They cannot cut metal.
Yeah,
I
so
missed that.
we went through this. What can't you do with this stuff?
Sneak it into work, let me know.
Yeah,
How much metal?
there it
do you
is.
need?
You can't cut through metal. You can't cut through thick wood, which we talked about. You got to be really careful with plastics. You got to know what it is, because a lot of plastics, like PVC, they'll generate chlorine gas. So do not do that. Other plastics, while they might be safe, they might not actually cut. They'll just melt. So also watch out for things that are clear, because a lot of times the laser will just go right through it. Other ones, the laser, like acrylic, apparently it does cut right through. It'll cut acrylic really, really well. I haven't done any acrylic, but it's very popular. It has to do with the wavelength of the laser beam.
What about blue styrofoam, that cuts that, as in, I'm thinking the gases.
Yeah, so I think blue, so I don't know what that material is. Like the white stuff, the poly, I think that's polystyrene.
Polystyrene, yeah.
Yeah, so that it might be okay. But
You can melt that without producing.
yeah, with fumes. So it might be
the old wire
safe.
cutters. Yeah, when they cut wing cores
right.
and stuff.
Yeah.
How
Yeah.
thick is that stuff normally? I mean,
Yeah, right, exactly. It's usually thick, and that's the thing, is that I mentioned about the focus depth. So I don't know how well, like if you had a substantially thick piece of foam,
It probably wouldn't work.
yeah, I don't know. I think that focus depth would be a problem.
They also have extenders to raise up your
Yeah.
pantry, right?
So, and that's, a popular first project for one of these things is just to make longer feet to stick under the corners and pick the thing up. Like if you want to engrave like on top of a box, you got to pick the whole machine up so that, it doesn't crash into it.
What outside dimensions can you cut? Like how big is your
So most of them are probably about, this big.
2x2?
Yeah, 2 feet by 2 feet, and that's like the inside area. Mine came with that, but I also bought the extension kit, which will allow me to put in a full 3 foot long piece of balsa. Because I was you don't even need that. If you're going to be cutting parts out of a full length sheet of balsa, you can cut like half of them, shift the sheet, and cut the other half. It's easy enough to like reposition everything. But if you've got like a fuselage side, you can't stop because you'll never get it lined up again. So that, so if you really want to do that, got a
So
question?
Mike, you said the machine won't cut metal. Would it engrave brass?
So what it'll do is if you coat the metal with anything, it'll etch away the coating. So if you had like anodized aluminum, it can etch through the anodizing, leaving the bare aluminum below. Any kind of paint that you put on it, you might be able to etch it away. Stainless steel, I have heard that you can engrave that.
Yeah, you can engrave it, you can't cut it.
Right, you can't cut through it, but you can engrave. So you can like put we could use it for for our memorial possibly.
I was kind of thinking out loud, yeah.
That's probably worthwhile to. I've got
that
some.
would be brass?
No, we could use stainless steel.
Okay.
Which would be good for outside.
And I have some stainless steel, so I will give that a try and then show you how that works
Guess what?
out.
I don't have a plaque yet. All right, it's good to know though, thank you.
All right. Also, they advertise that you can engrave leather, and it absolutely works, but it stinks really bad, so be aware. Come on. Whoa. I think this is the next one. Yeah. So let's talk about file formats. You got to get you got to go get some artwork, whether you want to cut it out or just do engraving. So if you're engraving, you can use any image file. It's an array of pixels that'll engrave deeper or not so deep depending on the brightness of the image. But if you want to cut something out, you need something that's going to be called a SVG file format. In these files, instead of having pixels and finding what the color value is, it actually defines a path, and the laser machine will follow that path. So that's the file format you have to use. Luckily, there's all kinds of sites out there with all kinds of artwork that you can just download and use. These things are colored in, but it doesn't cut out colored in. You end up with like the E would be cut out here. So a lot of times when you're browsing artwork like this, you'll see stuff in color here, but that really doesn't mean anything. That's just there so you can see better what it is that the artwork looks like. This one's really misleading because it's got all kinds of shading and stuff like that. That means nothing to the laser cutter. So the other part of it is if you want to draw your own parts, you've got to end up getting it into this format. And I was planning on doing a whole, follow on how to work CAD and make your SVG, but I'm not sure if we'll do that or not. But there's a way to do that.
So you draw your own parts?
Yeah, so there's free CAD packages that you can use. You can, in fact, what I've been doing is I've been taking plans off the internet, import it into the CAD package, and then trace over it and make the path for the machine to trace. Yeah, and it works really well. Everything comes out the right size. So the machine has a few settings that you can adjust depending on your materials. So of course you can adjust the power output between 0 and 100%. And if at 100% it's still not cutting all the way through, you can do more than one pass. You can go up to 4 passes. You can do as many passes as you want. But once you get up to 4, if it hasn't cut through by then, it's probably not going to work. Speed, you can vary the speed. If you slow it down, it'll cut deeper. So, again, if you get up to full speed and or full power and it's still not cutting through, you can start slowing it down. You can do a combination of passes and speed and power output. So, you got a lot of adjustments on the laser to get, a good cut. By the way, you'll probably want to have a metric ruler nearby. All this stuff is in metric.
Have you found any material that discusses for the different density of wood, how much speed, power, or number of passes they
Yeah.
equate, or is it trial and error?
There's definitely trial and error. So when I bought my machine, I went to the manufacturer's website, and they had like a spreadsheet that you could download that had like recommended settings for different kinds of materials and different thicknesses. And I took that and I put it on a machine, and then as I went and did my own cutting, I tweaked it, to what I wanted. So definitely, keep notes, because you'll forget otherwise. But yeah, there's definitely different settings work better for different things. And I've also written myself a checklist of, when I go to cut something new, first thing I'll do is cut out a little square out of the corner, and keep cutting out squares until I get the settings satisfactory. And then, there's also, you got to make sure to remember to reset the focus height. You got to remember, whether you need air assist or not, that kind of thing. So, I like to put together a little checklist so that, if I'm trying something new, I make sure that I don't forget something, and that's why it's not working the way it should.
Now, I know you use X-Tool, and X-Tool seems like a really good, high-quality one. Are there other brands you'd recommend, or things that you were looking at when you did your analysis on what to buy?
So
things to stay away from or things to look for?
Yeah, I've got a whole bunch of slides on that later,
Okay.
so I'll save that till later. I'm not going to recommend particular brands because the whole brand situation is very fluid. There are a few, like the one that I bought was called X-Tool. That one's pretty stable. You can buy those now. I suspect you'll be able to buy them for the foreseeable future. But there's a lot of them that have just alphabet soup brand names, and you'll never see them again. We talked about balsa, plywood. I want to talk about masking and transfer. One thing that I found that I ordered both of these two types of masking films. This one is a clear, it's called Frisket film. It doesn't cut with the laser, it just sort of melts a little bit. But it is kind of stretchy, so if you're doing like airbrushing and stuff, and you can use an X-Acto blade on that. But if you want to use the laser beam to cut out, masking patterns, you want this. It's called transfer tape. It's a lot like masking tape, and I did notice it's not very sticky, so that's good because you apply it on something, you paint over it, and then you peel it off. You got no residue behind. I did find that the light will kind of pass through it, so you got to have pretty high settings to cut through the masking tape reliably. And the reason why I bring this up is because so in this case, what I had was some monocoat pattern, like decorations here. And you can see that there's two pieces here. There's this middle piece, and then the bezel that goes around it. So when I cut that out with the laser machine, the monocoat comes with that backing. When you cut that out, the monocoat actually, where it's cut, like sticks to the backing just a little bit. So it doesn't come flying off or blow away or anything like that. So that's great. But then to transfer this in alignment onto your model, that's where that transfer film comes on. You put it on, the one side after you've cut it out. You can peel off the part in the middle. Then you can take the backing off, move the whole thing to your model, go on with the iron to tack it in place, then peel the transfer tape off, and you're left with this, with all of its alignment. So like you were doing with your numbers and everything?
I was thinking the same thing.
Yeah.
I almost called you. I'm like, I don't know about them.
And it becomes super easy because you just boom,
Because
and
if
it's
you
all
use a
lined
knife,
up.
it just catches and you start getting a little edging on it.
Yeah, and like the alignment is perfect too,
Yeah.
this way. So these came out really, really good. You'll see I decorated the plane. I'll bring it on the fall meeting. It really came out nice. So some of the things to watch out. If you're looking to, if you are thinking about buying a laser machine, here's some of the things to be aware of. There's a lot of misinformation about how powerful these things are. They'll say, like this one here claims to be 50 watts. That's the power input to the thing. The actual output of the laser on this one was only 5 watts.
Oh.
So you got to look very carefully. At least I haven't seen any that are like, totally lying. They will say 50 watts, and then when you read the fine print, it'll say, 50 watts input, 5 watts output. So pay attention to that. Some of the other pitfalls, like this one says, you can carve these different kinds of objects. You might look at that and think, oh, I can cut metal. It doesn't cut metal. They don't. They just don't. But it can etch cuttings, and I think that's more what they're trying to get at. Part of the challenge of these ads is that, you know, English is not the first language for these people. So you get a lot of English on the ads.
English.
This one, on this particular one, it says operating software, laser Gerbil, Lightburn. These are brand names of laser software. They don't come with the machine. Lightburn is really good software, but you pay $60 for it. This laser Gerbil is free.
Turbo is free, yeah, it's open source.
It's open source, but you're buying a machine that, you know, hopefully it's going to work. They say it works,
Yeah.
you know. My machine did come with software, and it works really good. So, you know, if your machine comes with software, you know the manufacturer has tried it and it works. And if it doesn't work, you'll see it in the comments.
Right, yeah.
So,
Research.
and of course, like I said, there's all kinds of English that's really terrible in here. No, these are not, don't buy these sorts of things. This one here, I don't even know how that's supposed to work. You know, it probably tries to steer the beam around somehow.
Laser pecker?
Yeah, laser pecker, isn't that
Enough
awesome?
said.
This one, you can see that the arm is cantilevered out there, so you move the laser beam out there and it's probably springing around and not, you know, accurate, and it probably has different focal depth, you know, out this way than that way, so that's a bad design. This isn't even a laser machine. It's just a honeycomb bed that you put underneath whatever you're working on. So, yeah, so pay really close attention to what people are advertising. You know, things that don't look like the kind of thing that I showed in the video, just avoid them. And I think that's it. Half an hour. Thank you.